The luxurious La Bella Spa Salon offers the best personal care for your improved quality of life.
At El Bosco Bistro and Wine Bar, you will enjoy elegant, private dining with an old-world cuisine containing sustainable ingredients from the farm to your table.
La Bella Spa Salon has the latest in CBD therapy. Feel better with a botanical hemp massage or choose natural CBD products to treat pain, PTSD, and anxiety.
Enjoy the world-class experience that will leave you renewed, refreshed, and looking your best. La Bella Vita. You deserve it.
Welcome to another episode of Legacy Boxing Showcase, sponsored by Legacy Boxing Promotions. I'm Ed Nunez along with Austin Killeen. And Austin, we were supposed to hopefully have boxer Maurice Jackson, who also fights MMA, as our studio guest. And maybe Maurice had a hard time finding it. But, you know, you were up there at Buffalo Thunder a couple weeks ago. We have a couple of things we would really want to get into. You know, we'll get in. This is a boxing show sponsored by, as we mentioned, the Pettis Boxing Promotions. But we have to talk, we will, in a later segment about you know, every time I talk to you, man, and I've known you for a little bit now, but I just think about New England, Boston, the Patriots, the Celtics, the Red Sox, Boston Garden. I mean, there's so we'll get to your Celtics, who I know you're anxious to talk about. Another big win last night against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Oh, I love it. I'm in my glory, and I'm not being disloyal to the pro teams out here because we don't have any.
And you know what? Chances are we probably never will. Hate to say that, you know, we're loyal to the Lobos and things like that. But, you know, Maurice Jackson fought Mark Jimenez of Santa Fe a couple weeks ago at Buffalo Thunder. And you were out there, as you were out there for a lot of fights that happened in Santa Fe, Clovis, Hobbs, Community Center here, you know, the Mountain View Community Center. If there's a local fight, Austin Killeen's there, and Killeen'sCorner.com. If you want to know more about local fights or boxing in general, go there. Austin, tell us a little bit about Maurice Jackson. We had him on the mic with Mike Adams about 3 weeks ago.
Well, apparently he's lost a lot of weight because I can hardly see him next between us. But, but I was very impressed with him. Cage fighters in the cage put their weight on their front feet because they have to be able to move their legs quick because they're targets, where fighters can sit back on their heel and leverage their punches. So cage fighters will get into a boxing ring and they'll perform well because they're used to being in a hostile environment. But that one habit they can't unlearn. You say, no, get back on your feet. Well, for 10 years you've been telling them to stay on the ball at their feet. Now it's like brushing your teeth with the opposite hand. Well, he was amazing, and he got great leverage on his punches, and his opponent was quite a bit taller than him, and his opponent could slip punches. I was amazed.
Hey, you wrote that in the column.
Yeah, I was, and he also had a nice uppercut, so it wasn't like Maurice was fighting some bum. He had a live opponent in front of him. He broke him down. He worked him over, and the referee stopped it in the third round. I thought it was a very impressive showing.
And you said the opponent here was Mark Jimenez, who weighed in at 172.2 of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I think one of the things, and you and I talked about this morning, was the difference between cage fighting and boxing. And you know, you mentioned he's a southpaw, I believe, like Marvin Hagler. Maurice Jackson, that's his hero, was Marvin Hagler. So you mentioned the difference between. Can you explain that a little bit? Because you mentioned that to me this morning. I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that.
Oh, bad. I was wondering if this was our guest. Sorry about that.
Yeah, maybe you can call him back after the segment's over.
I can't even see who it is.
Yeah, yeah, but anyway, the elusive Maurice Jackson. Anyway, we're just talking about him. He doesn't even know it. So you mentioned that, though, about the foot forward.
Right.
And, you know, that really fascinated me. So can you explain that?
Well, when you think about it, if most fighters lead with their left, Maurice Jackson's a southpaw, so he leads with his right. So if you can picture that, you can see that their hands are almost touching. My left jab and your right jab So it's very hard to jab each other. And our lead foot is almost touching. So the secret to being successful in a fight like that is to get your lead foot outside the other guy's lead foot, because you're literally punching over his back. And because he's inside of you, and I hope I'm not too technical.
No, but I think people need to understand,
But his
very
arm
interested
is in the
this.
wrong place. He can't swing backwards and hit your body. So Jackson took advantage of that. That was the big difference. And he was able to loop shots over his opponent's shoulder and also land body shots. Because in the first round, he tried to land head shots, and Jimenez kept moving surprisingly well, because he appeared to be 3 or 4 inches taller than Jackson, and he was able to slip under his punches. But Jackson didn't panic, very relaxed, went to work. When you get hit hard, you try not to show the pain. And Jimenez was taking some tough shots to the body, but he was showing nothing. I was like, man, he must have a steel body or something. But finally in the third round, it just
Took its toll.
Oh, just instantly, he couldn't even lift his arms anymore. And the referee wisely, Jackson just worked him over. But Jackson had to take some uppercuts, and he had to deal with the head movement. So it wasn't like Jackson just walked in and just beat somebody they found in a parking lot.
Got about a minute left in this segment, and what I wanted to ask you, why is it so hard? And again, should you just concentrate on MMA or boxing? I mean, you don't see a lot of guys cross over. In your opinion, are Maurice Jackson's best days in boxing ahead of him? What do you think?
Well, his age, he's not a kid.
34.
Yes, I don't even know if we're supposed to be saying that. I heard the 28 kicked around, but he is 34, which, but locally, I think he's a popular person, and he could get a following, and I think in the local fight guides, I think he's interesting. He's in tremendous shape.
Which is always key. I'll tell you one thing about him. When we had him on the mic with Mike Adams again, Saturdays 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., 610 a.m. radio, when I heard his voice, I didn't see him, and the connection you mentioned, you listened, wasn't great, but when I heard that voice, I'm like, man, there's something about that voice that kind of shakes me up a little bit, man.
He wouldn't be in that singing group from Puerto Rico called Minuto, not with that deep voice.
Yeah. Let's take a break. We'll be back to Legacy Boxing Showcase after these messages.
That's rhythm, that's beat, that's gone. That's a two-run bomb turned in by Gabby Gomez. Second. Gotta give them a lot of gas, lifted in the air to right field. That's drifting, and gone. That one drifting, the wind caught that baby and just kept it going. And finger comes up.
This one is
that's
hammered out
over
to
his
left
head,
field.
yeah.
That's gone!
It's a home run.
A two-run shot for Austin Schlegel. And La Cueva out in front 3-1. First homer in Isotope Park.
That's pulled well in to right, and it's gone! First inning homer for Martinez. Oh my God, that was wild. Who would have thought of that, huh? The Falcons.
That's their very look at this. Schlegel gonna hand it off to Pineda. Off the bag. No, the tag is there. Out!
Season 1. Driven deep to center, back, going back, gone! Gomez on the 3-run bomb to straightaway center field. And you said it, explosive. Corner remain up. That's driven up the middle for another base hit. They're gonna wave him around from second. Here comes the throw. Got him!
This one is hit heavily out to left field, getting underneath it. Ramos makes the play, the grab, and it's over. The 2018 state champs. It's the La Cueva Bears, their 10th in school history. And what a play to seal it up. We'll talk with your dad now. The big hug. That's priceless right there.
It is Bird who got a good jump off there. But right next to Bird, though, is Volcanoes Alejandro. This could be Bird.
It's a clean start. Jordan Bird there already in front with a white headband. It's not even close, ladies and gentlemen. This kid is something special. And Bird with a 10-5-8. He just missed it. Jordan Bird already blowing everyone out of the water.
Welcome back to Legacy Boxing Showcase, sponsored by Legacy Boxing Promotions. I'm Ed Nunez, along with Austin Killeen, producer Josh Brown, doing a great job back in the studio there. And Austin, you know, we talked again, Maurice Jackson, it seems like he's unable to make it, and hopefully we'll get him on at a later time, because I think he, again, anybody that, and Mike Adams covers on Saturdays, MMA and boxing. So anybody that crosses over from MMA to boxing or boxing to MMA, it's always intriguing to me. And the reasons or the things that you mentioned about how, you know, again, you're right, because in the cage, they're attacking your legs, they're wrestling, jiu-jitsu. There's so many different things you have to defend against in the cage.
More variables than in boxing.
Right. So in boxing, I would have been very interested to see Maurice Jackson fight, because it's a different game in the cage. You're right. Whole different game. And you mentioned you thought he had a pretty good showing. And, you know, at the end of the first segment, you thought he could maybe come up, maybe have a following. His age isn't really working for him. It's not over the hill at all. But, you know, things have to happen for him, I would think, rather quickly in the next couple of years as far as getting a championship shot.
Well, you talk about him. He's trained by Mike Winkeljohn, and Mike flies under the radar. He's worked with several fighters. Obviously, he was very successful with Holly Holm in a boxing ring, and people think of him as an MMA guy. So Mike Winkeljohn's, he's comfortable in a boxing ring in the corner, working fighters' corners.
See, and I don't think that's probably not mentioned enough, because the minute you hear Mike Winkeljohn, you think automatically the octagon and the cage, Holly Holm, and so he trains both ways.
Right. And he's good at it. Very relaxed. Personally, I don't like screamers in the corner. And he's very quiet. He talks to his fighter. He's not trying to talk to the audience in the 10th row, which some trainers do. They're screaming at their fighters, so, oh, look at me. You know,
so many different trainers throughout history. When I think of Angelo Dundee, and I just think of him because he trained Ali, he trained Sugar Ray Leonard, and I still remember that fight against Thomas Hearns, the first fight. You know, you're blowing it, kid, 14th round, you're blowing it, kid, and then Sugar Ray Leonard comes out in the 14th, and what a fight that was in Las Vegas in 1981.
Interesting, 76 Olympics, which I think was our best Olympic team ever. Howard Davis was voted the outstanding fighter of the Olympics. Howard Davis had a contract with CBS where he could pick his own opponents. So he picked Marshmallows. Sugar Ray Leonard fought the guy in the other corner that Angelo Dundee put there. And Angelo Dundee believed in 50-50 fights. So if you look at his first 3 fights, Leonard had wars. He didn't even score a knockdown. And Davis was destroying people. So in his 4th fight, Leonard scored a spectacular first-round knockout. And people were, well, where'd that power come from? Because we never saw it. But that's because his early fights were so tough. Meantime, Howard Davis was blowing through everybody, got his title fight. He wasn't prepared and lost. And he's the only of the 5 gold medalists, the only one who never won a world title.
Always on the cusp, it seemed. I remember watching a lot of his fights on ABC, Wide World of Sports, CBS Sports Spectacular. Always on the cusp of a championship, but never seemed to get there.
His early fights hurt him. We've talked about Angel Perez, the Perez brothers' son, who was fighting pro. His first 2 pro fights, no fault of his, but there was nothing in the other corner. So he's 2-0 with 2 knockouts. But he needs a tough fight because he has a lot of skills. But in life, you either are going forward, you're going backwards. There's no holding the line. And Angel has a tremendous amateur background. He needs a tough opponent.
Well, he's 2-0, like you said. So you'd think the 3rd fight, when it's he's going to have a 3rd fight, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th fight. You would think the next opponent would have a little bit more skill.
Well, the 2nd fight wasn't the Perez brothers in defense of them. The fight's out in Hobbs. They had like 4 different opponents fall out. So that's beyond his control. But he doesn't need the typical build-up that a novice fighter would require. He could, Jason, not that they're going to put them against each other, but if he was in the ring with Jason Sanchez right now, that'd be a terrific fight.
You know what, with Jason Sanchez, victorious in his last 2 fights, and he was a guest of ours about a month and a half ago. And boy, just thinking about that fight in my mind, that would be, and I think, Austin, in all reality, that's 4 or 5 fights, 3 or 4 fights.
Well, I don't think they want to put them against each other anyways, but they do spar. I've watched them spar. And Jason Sanchez is an interesting personality because he has a left jab like a battering ram. You think of featherweights as really flying around the ring. He fights like a heavyweight. He comes in there and just wants to destroy you.
Works the body.
Anything. He'll work your glove. He just strikes. And it's like he's attacking a door and he's going to knock it down. He'll do it with his fist.
I really like him a lot.
Oh, and I only when we met him on the show, his personality is totally different than his ring persona.
We had him on the show here again. It's about a month and a half ago. Shy, introverted. Abraham Pettis is like that too. And I'll tell you what, between Abraham Pettis and Angel Pettis, those are some Hollywood-looking kids, man. Come in with the mom. The mom's got the dress shirt. I love those kids. And same thing with Jason Sanchez. He was kind of shy at first, introverted, very humble, and then as soon as the show went on, he started, coming out of the shell a little bit more.
You described it perfectly. He's got a great personality, just totally different than what I expected, because my image of him is from what I see in the ring. Not that he trash talks anybody
at all,
but when the bell rings, he's Darth Vader.
Puts in work, man.
He's there to destroy you.
I was impressed with that fight we saw against Stephon McIntyre back in November, Battle of the Brave, which the Pettis Boxing Promotions put on there as well. We've got one more segment here on Legacy Boxing Promotions. We'll be back after these messages.
At AC Prime, we cover cooling conversions to your plumbing needs. Locally owned and operated with hands-on owners. Call us today, 505-235-4904. AC Prime, our prime concern is you. Get into the game with Garden Swartz Team Sales. They have everything you need, from screen printing, embroidery, and digital printing services, high school letterman jackets, and all high school and club uniforms, and individual and team apparel with the most reliable brands like Speedline, Rollins, and Wilson. And don't forget to check out the latest F7 Shut helmet. It's all at Garden Swartz Team Sales. Give them a call, 505-884-1234. Garden Swartz Team Sales. Full House Real Estate. At Full House Real Estate, we handle everything from home sales to property management. With us, our team is your team. Give us a call today, 505-244-1918.
Welcome back to Legacy Boxing Showcase, sponsored by the Pettis Boxing Promotions. I'm Ed Nunez along with Austin Colleen. And Austin, in the first two segments, we've talked about some fights you saw out there at Buffalo Thunder. And one of the third bout that I wanted to talk to you in on that card, Holmes, Holmes Productions out there at Buffalo Thunder. Mike Adams does the all the ring announcing, Hall of Fame. I'm gonna hype up Mike, because Mike's my guy. He's in your boxing Hall of Fame, and I remember when he did the ring announcing at Battle of the Brave. And he introduced Matthew Griego, Diamond Boy Griego, and I thought that was one of the best introductions I've ever heard. There's no doubt he's Hall of Famer for a reason, and a very, very good friend of mine and of the show. Hopefully, we'll get him on in a later later shows down the way. But Brian McLean, or Jake McLean, son of Sean McLean, fought Loreto Olivas, and they're both at 156. Olivas weighed in at 156.3. Jake McLean, the son of Sean McLean, weighed in at 159 of Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Tell us about that fight.
Well, McLean has a lot of baggage through no fault of his own. His father was a very successful cruiserweight, in fact, a claimant for the world title. And his brother is only lost once in 7 fights. So he walks in the ring and people are expecting something of him. He's just having his first fight. He has no amateur background. He fought well. He wasn't nervous. Offensively, he was throwing good shots. I wish I could remember that fighter behind me that night, a highly decorated amateur, but he kept shouting into the ring, "Get your hands up." McLean was going forward, but his chin was right out there. And in the second round, the guy just...
Without defense, you mean?
No defense at all. And the guy just clipped him. And he went down hard. He was on his back.
You said he was down for a while.
Oh, he was on the floor for a good minute or more.
We saw Christopher Russell get knocked out by Matthew Papitas Escobar in November. Would you say it was kind of a knockout similar to that?
Very similar. He was on the floor for a long time. Russell is probably still talking to himself over that.
You know what, Austin, to me, I've seen knockouts. I saw Thomas Hearns knock out Roberto Duran. Duran waking up when his face hit the floor. Juan Manuel Marquez knocks out Manny Pacquiao. That was a scary knockout. You've seen so many fights, and when we saw Christopher Russell and his head hit the the canvas,
right? That's worse.
Man, yes, the other fight we wanted to talk about, and you wanted to mention this. This took place in Clovis, New Mexico. Eduardo Silva won by Belen, won by TKO over Elijo Sena of Clovis, and Sena breaking his leg. Tell us about that fight.
Well, I think Sena, he was a highly decorated amateur and disappeared for 10 years. I don't know where he went, but he came back a couple of years ago, but he's just not active. And he's a tremendous heavyweight. And now he's got 2 wins, a draw, and a loss. And he fell down without being hit and dislocated his knee. He couldn't get up. But Derek Perez, one of the 2 Perez brothers from Belen, no relation to Perez from Legacy Promotion, immediately got on Facebook trash talking him like his opponent knocked him out. And I thought that was uncalled for. You know, if you're going to tell a story like that, tell the whole story. He didn't mention that how the fight ended. You reading this comment, you'd get, well, this guy must have destroyed him.
Right.
And now he's writing checks with his mouth that De Silva has to cash, because now he's calling out Ronnie Baca, the heavyweight. Believe me, if that kid from Berlin ever got in the ring with Ronnie Baca, Baca would destroy him.
You're talking about Pettis, right?
Right.
And not again, you mentioned no relation to the Pettis boxing.
They're
at
two,
all.
Gene and Derek. And Gene is quiet. You know, he's tough. They're both tough fighters. But Derek, boy, he writes checks with his mouth.
You know what, Austin, and you know, you're kind of really from the old school of boxing wars. You've seen a lot of fights. You're not really a fan of, you know, you've seen trash talking. It's commonplace. You know, we've seen
Right.
Ali, Camacho. You know, Hector Camacho used to have me rolling.
It's good if they're funny.
Right. Camacho was entertaining. You know.
Right here in town, you have Hollywood Montel, who unfortunately got hurt a few years ago when he fought Tony Valdez. He was hysterical at the weigh-ins. He could think of one-liners, and the other one is Zubia, Edgar Zubia, down in Hobbs. Same thing. I would pay to see those two guys face each other at a weigh-in, because they're one-liners that just flying. And to me, that's entertaining.
Entertainment.
But if we're just crude and we're trying to act like we hate each other, it comes off as boorish. So I don't mind trash talking if the people are really good. Muhammad Ali obviously he'd have you in stitches. He was so funny. Zubia was fighting the Black Rooster. So what's he do? He comes into the weigh-in with one of those rubber chickens he had rubbed in a fireplace and threw it at the Black Chicken. You know, and then he had a couple of one-liners.
Creative.
What's that?
Creative.
Very creative stuff, and everybody's laughing at the weigh-in. I mean, he's just, so I love that.
Entertainment.
Entertainment. But there's a fine line. If you're too good with your one-liners, now the other guy looks sympathetic, because all he can think of in response, well, you know, and then you feel sorry for the other guy. So you got to get that fine line where you don't cross it.
Right, and then nobody could really come back at Ali because he could entertain like no one else. Some of the things he said, I mean, even I was watching, which was an underrated movie, by the way, Ali with Will Smith, the underrated movie. I was watching it for like the third time, and you know, the things he'd say about Foreman, the mummy, you know, it's entertainment. Big George laughed about it later. Big George still laughs about it, but he could say things, and you're like, wow, how do you come back to that?
Well, he had the rubber gorilla, was Joe Frazier, and he's beating
a little bit over the line there,
yeah, but
a little bit over the line. But yeah, you know, he said things and the rhymes he'd come up with. Austin, we got about 2 minutes left, and I said we'd get to this. Your Boston Celtics leading, going back to Cleveland 3-2. You've lived in Boston. You've been a fan. Russell, Kuzi, Sanders, Havlicek, Sam Jones, McHale, all you've seen it all. So this version here, missing two of their key players. How do you feel about where the Celtics are?
I can't believe it. Shocked. I'm so happy, because not too many people like Boston teams, so I should be controlling my laughter, but I loved last night. And I grew up, I saw every Russell championship.
11 of them, 11.
And the Boston Bruins were in last place in hockey, and they would sell out the Boston Garden. You could go to the Boston Garden the noontime for the afternoon playoff game and buy a ticket to the Celtics. You couldn't give tickets away. So go.
You saw games in the Garden, and let's remember, no air conditioning. I mean, yeah, I mean, that place was archaic, man. It really was. But how many championships did you saw? Every one of Russell's, that was 11 of them. Got about 30 seconds left.
They used to, those Celtics used to train at the Cambridge YMCA. So they'd ask you, Ed, we've got to practice. And you'd be in the gym where they're going to practice. Oh, okay. And
you'd have to leave.
And that's where they practice.
Old school.
Old school.
So you think Boston? One more comment. You think they're going to finish the series in Game 6?
I'd love to think that. Realistically, I love LeBron James. He's I think a great player. So I don't know if
been up and down. We'll have to see. That'll do it for this episode of Legacy Boxing Showcase. We'll Be back in a couple of weeks. For Austin Killeen, producer Josh Brown, I'm Ed Nunez. Thanks for tuning in.